Hi, welcome to Tuesday Tips and Talks. Today I have an old friend with me and also a past podcast guest. I'll link to our conversation in the notes. But for now, I want to welcome Max Trombly.
Hello, hello.
Hi,
It's nice to
Max.
see you, Lisa. Yeah, I'm happy
It's
to be here.
so nice to see you too. And we did have a conversation in the past. We've known each other for a while. We run in common circles. But really, the reason I asked you to jump on today at last minute notice, really just half an hour ago, was because I want to talk about the viral reel that you had that has taken off and caught some fire in the last couple of days.
It certainly did catch fire. And I didn't really see it coming. I knew it would be a little edgy for some people, but to have 400,000 views and that many comments that were vitriolic and hateful was pretty amazing for me to see.
I could imagine why you would be kind of shocked at the vitriol, although in some ways not really, because probably on some level could have seen it coming.
I definitely did.
Before we do that, I might post it here.
Somebody asked me recently on a Q&A, what about men who date women who are like 10, 15 years younger? And the answer is simple. Men who date women that are over a decade younger are doing so they can absolve themselves of the responsibility that they will be called to by women of their age bracket. It's a way of getting away with easier relationships. If I were to date a 22-year-old girl, she doesn't even know what she can ask for in relationships, so it's just easy until it's not. You know, no one wants to talk about this because everyone wants to say like, oh, I can do whatever I want. And it's like, yeah, but why are you doing it? And what's the effect? Men who date women who are more than 10 years younger are doing it because they can get away with less. Because they don't have to show up. And women who are accepting these relationships, you've got to ask yourself what that's about. I don't care what people do. I care about truth. And I call what I see. And I see it a lot.
Say a little bit about where you're coming from first in the initial reel, and then we can talk about your response to it.
I've been doing men's work for 10 years. And one of the things that seems very common culturally right now, if you look at the data, is that there are quite a few divorces spearheaded by women at a certain point in life. And the more work I've done in the self-growth community, the more I've come to realize that women get tired of men who are unwilling to grow and mature and match them at their level of growth and maturity. And when you look back at the historical record of humankind, since the dawn of mankind, there have been initiations that were constructed culturally for men. But what I've now learned when I go even deeper is that they aligned beautifully with the feminine initiations that exist biologically. So if you look at it like this, a woman begins to menstruate, and at that exact same age, that is when men were initiated into manhood. So women biologically initiate, and men were initiated by their tribes, cultures, civilizations, etc. The second initiation is around marriage and fatherhood or motherhood. Now, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, marriage comes from the church. No, it doesn't. If you actually look at the San people of Africa, they have a 300,000-year history of union. And if you look at indigenous tribes across the world, they also have a history of what we call today marriage. And why I think this is important is because people today go, oh, marriage was just something about controlling women and it's just from the church and it's patriarchal. They're missing the part where it's such an incredibly important part of keeping a stable village or community. One of the things that marriage does is it takes a man out of his playboy era as a warrior in the world and says, you now have a deeper responsibility with a woman and a family. That initiation still reverberates today as the bachelor party. Most people don't realize that. That's what this originally was about. The bachelor party was originally about taking a bachelor and the men would grab him, move him out and go, this is what is coming. This is how you hold it. This is what's next. That was the point of it. And while we don't hold it that way, the tradition still exists. It's just empty. Yeah. Now it's just a bachelor party.
Yeah.
Now, the third initiation is that when a father becomes the age where his kids initiate into adulthood, the young adulthood version, the father initiates into the elder position in a village or society. So those are the three initiations: boy to man, man to husband and father father to elder. Those are the three initiations that were held for men. Now watch this. That elder initiation matches with peri and menopause. And so they all match the biological thing. Menstruation, birth, and menopause are synchronized against initiations for men culturally.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that analogy, and it fits so well with the maiden mother crone archetypes.
Yep.
Obviously, it matches it. But here's where I think things get interesting, nuanced, and complicated. I believe, and I've been talking for a while about the fact that we're missing an archetype for women because we're living longer. It used to be that we died at 60. So now there's an archetype in the middle for the time in between. I call it 50 and 75. So it's post-menopause, but before total crone years start, and because our biology is changing. So I'm wondering how that maps on to the male model that you have, and or if it's partly responsible for this age-related differences that we're seeing and that you're speaking to.
Yeah, so it's sort of like warrior, and then you become what? A king?
King.
So let's call it king, right? So the first stage of the king is you've got your family and you raise your kids, and if there's this second part before you become an elder or wise man, what it would be looking back toward your queen going, what's next? What are we now going to do with this kingdom that we've created? How do I continue to hold our kids? But what can we now do?
Yeah.
And that's what that space would really be about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's actually perfect. That's a perfect mapping of what I'm seeing is missing, or what I'm seeing we need to now recreate, given that we have a longer lifespan.
Hold on. There's something really interesting. Let me just let me tap on this.
Yeah.
So I've helped quite a few couples through my coaching practice in this moment. Kids go off to college and they feel like there's a vacancy of love or connection, right?
Yes.
What do we do here? If you want to self-initiate, you need to do something that is beyond your capacity so that you can expand through it into a new experience that is beyond that you have lived before. Does that make sense?
Okay, hold on. I think there was a lot of richness in there, but you have to say it again for me because my brain works fast, but I want to let it land. Say that again.
The core way that we initiate is a person must go through an experience that is beyond their capacity. Into a new experience and a new frame of understanding life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, beautiful.
So when I teach couples how to reintegrate into love, passion, and intimacy in this second stage of life after the kids have gone off to college, I always say the two of you need to create an experience together that is unique, where you're both experiencing newness. And through the newness and excitement of that, you're having a new experience like you were dating for the first time. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love doing this with you. Like that's how we really reintegrate passion and intimacy and energy in a relationship after 20 years of the duress of holding kids.
What I hear in that is that because we're in a new time frame, a new world that doesn't have traditional initiation rights, you're giving the autonomy to the couple to say, hey, this is yours to create and co-create as you desire.
And I empower them with the understanding of what the initiation is so they can self-initiate. And that's the thing is some initiations have to be held, especially the men initiations. But in relationship, you just use the idea of what an initiation is to actually re-initiate into more of whatever you want. When we get to the point that our kids go off to school, we're a little tired. And if we're still in the same relationship, there is sort of a need for a new flame, a new excitement. And there's a way to create that.
I love that. So with that as the context, let's also then talk about the fact that in our current world, in our modern world right now, we don't often, many of us stick all the way through that archetypal relational process. So there are a lot of divorces in the 40s and 50s. And I think that that's the context in which your video was speaking, because you're talking about people dating, having chosen to not go through that next self-created initiation stage together.
Yeah. So let me just flag for your listeners and anyone else that's watching this. What I was highlighting was 40 to 55-year-old men who are, instead of staying within their age bracket or holding women of their age and maturity, what I basically said is the reason that men eject to younger women is because they don't have the capacity to hold women of their similar thing. And this is why I brought up the initiation thing, which I wasn't even planning on doing. A woman is initiating. 40 to 55, that's perimenopause and menopause. And like she's biologically moving toward a different depth of life. It's going to happen no matter what. And so as a woman's going through that, she's going to want more from her man. She's going to want the man to get out of his adolescence or whatever he's still holding on to that's adolescent behavior and rise into a higher maturity as a man. And that's where this discord comes from, where, there's an ejection. And then men, as I saw in all the comments that were left on that reel, which are now hidden because there was and I'll get to why that is in a second. Men are admitting she was too much. I'm looking for something easier.
Yeah.
And the too much was probably just a call from a woman going, hey, I want you to show up. I want to have more from you. Enough with the video games, enough with the sports. Like, can we together have a life that feels like together? You
got a lot of responses that are saying, yeah, I prefer to date younger women because it's easier. Acknowledging what you were calling them out on, but justifying it. But then you also got men saying, justifying it from it being energizing. And I think you made a comment in the second reel that we'll talk about too, that sometimes it's men who don't manage their own energy and cultivate their own ability to be enlivened and call her into enlivenment and welcome and hold her enlivenment that are the 100%. Ones that are looking for it somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm not getting what I want. I'm going to go somewhere else to get it.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some men that were just like, basically F you and you're right. And this is what I'm doing. Like, it was a lot of what I was getting. And I was like, well, this is odd. But then the second thing I was getting was these men that were like, no, you're wrong. Actually, why I date younger women is because they're youthful and they're energized. And I thought, well, that's cool. Why didn't you light up your wife? Why didn't you light her up to the place of being energized, excited, passionately on fire? Because you could have. But the thing is, most men are disempowered in that realm. They don't know. The most that they have is like, what is foreplay? And it's like, well, foreplay is an art, and it's a thing that you use to elicit desire through your desire and enticing hers. You know what I mean? And it's like, if you don't know how to create the basic foundational things you need in a relationship, you're gonna give up, because the first 3 years of a relationship, things happen pretty naturally. But then when it gets hard,
you don't have to work in the first 3 years. It happens for you just based on newness and energy and freshness. And
look at us meeting each other, doing things together. It's exciting. We're co-creating. It's the initiation experience. There's a natural initiation when you first meet somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what I ended up having to do was actually shut off the comments. And because two things happened. The first thing was I was getting a ton of people that were just raging at me, calling me all sorts of names. And that was like, okay, whatever. And all it took was me to check a couple of these profiles and see the photos they had on their page to know, like, these men aren't even in the range of, like, we're not in the, good for you, bro. Sorry, you're triggered. But the other thing is, a lot of men were attacking women that were sharing their stories and trying to make them wrong in the comments. And as soon as that started happening, I was trying to delete them and just get rid of them, because I don't want women attacked on my stuff. I'm not a safe space, and I'm not a free space. It's not like you can just do whatever you want in my spaces. I will remove you. But the thing is, it was happening so fast that I couldn't keep up with it. And I had coaching client calls, and I was at a soccer game with my son, and I was like, I'm not going to do this during this game. But then I opened the thing after the game, 500 more comments, and I'm like, I can't manage it. There's no way I can stop men from attacking the women in my comments. Like, we're not doing this anymore. Sorry. And I shut it down.
I saw some of the comments, not all the 500 before you shut it down, but I did see a number, and there is a response from women that you've always gotten because you hold a vision of men showing up in a way that's very different from most of the messages and most of the men that we see reflected. And so we as women see your messaging and feel, wow, this is real deep masculine allyship and protection. And I even will go back, on a personal level, when we first met, you were my very first practice partner in our teacher training program.
That's right.
And then the very first day of the very first year of teacher training, you came up to me and said, I'm really happy you're here. When I was the oldest woman in that community. And it was such a gift of saying, I see you, I value you, I think your presence is needed here, you matter. And it really was really meaningful. So it's not just, it's not just stuff that you say for Instagram. You live it and feel it and share it.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I forgot about that moment, and you're right. And you do matter,
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. So let's talk now about the response. I mean, we sort of mentioned it. Your second reel that you wrote, that you created in response to it, was the one that I told you when I reached out to you to say, can we do this recording? It really honestly made me cry, because for women who are aging, even those of us who take a stance for it being positive and the fact that we can age well and we can age artfully. And, that's one of my biggest messages in the world is let's rewrite the story and the narrative on aging, especially for women. But we still come up against all of the cultural baggage, all of the stories, all of the patterns, and they kind of hit our hearts,
I'm sure they do.
Yeah. And so you're taking that stance really felt like, again, such an act of protection.
Wow. Well, thank you. I didn't even realize that. I think the thing that came up for me, I'm not here to pander, and I'm not here to create 90-second sound bites. I'm here to create teachings that are of depth and importance, and I'm putting it out in the world. And the thing that really came up for me this morning is I was feeling all that happened in the past 24 hours with that reel. And I thought, what needs to be said? And I just went, I don't know, let me see. And I hit record. I had a crazy thing happen this week that I just didn't see coming. And it's sad. It's really sad, Basically, I put out a reel talking about how men will choose younger women because they're easier to hold in relationship. And it got thousands of comments and like 400,000 views in 24 hours. It was pretty crazy. And the thing is that reel, normally my reels stay within the like ecosystem of conscious people and conscious self-growth oriented, human beings. This one ejected into the population at large. And what happened was it created a huge firestorm. And basically the comments were broken down into two categories. The women who were like, yes, we've seen this. And the men who either justified or, in wildly angry response said, no, it's not that. It's this instead. But what they said it was instead was even worse. Basically, what men are saying in the comments is, why would I want to hold a woman that's my age? I thought that was horrible. Where is your integrity? Where is your respect for the person that is of your age bracket? Can you imagine as a man if someone said, I'm not interested in holding you, you're too old. I'm going to go find somebody younger. Like that's one of the most deplorable things that we could do as a human being is to just eject out of relationships with people of our age bracket and then just date younger. It's like there is nothing more selfish, honestly. And people had a problem with this and they're like, I get to do what I want. And it's like, yes, you do. And it means something about who you are, for sure. The other thing is men just came in and there was just this unbelievable thing, which was like, no, you're wrong. The reason we date younger is because of youth and energy. And I thought, my God, I have a woman who's in her 40s. Her energy is ebbing and flowing, as it will naturally in life. It's my job to evoke her into the things that are energized. It's my job to really enliven this relationship. That's what I get to do. When men are disempowered and not able to do that, this is what they're going to do. They're going to choose to date people who are naturally energized at young ages. It says a lot about the capacity of men to actually show up and create real relationships. It says a lot about the type of men that are out there in the real world. And so what does this mean? First of all, I want to clarify something. It's not just men. There are women that are like this too. When I dated, there were quite a few women who were not even close to the maturity I was looking for in a woman to become the mother of my children and to carry out our life together. At 35, I found that to be a problem. So I think that we have a immaturity in our populace problem that's just real. The second thing is that it's a scary world out there. The justification for horrible behavior was just unrelenting. Over 100 comments every 10 minutes at the peak of that reel. And it was the same thing. Men calling me all the names because I had flagged this behavior, or men just justifying, yeah, I don't want to date older women. And I was like, holy shit. And all I could think was, what about the women? What about the families? What about becoming a man who's a grandfather, still in love with his, well, you know what I mean? Like, what about like, and it just had me go, fuck. We're rightly fucked. And I don't know what I can do about all that, probably nothing. But what I'm here to do is get men to tap into a deeper possibility in life. And if I can do that for 10,000 men, maybe I can make a sizable shift in a part of our culture. But witnessing the general population of men responding to that reel was literally one of the worst things I've seen of humanity this close and personal. I don't engage with men like this. I don't engage with or respect men who act in these ways. And I don't spend time in their spaces, but they all came to mine. And it was really odd to see. So what that means is that you need to be fierce. If you're a human being that wants a higher possibility in life, you have to find those people. If you're a woman dating, you need to find men that will respect you at your age. If you're a man, do better. Rise in your maturity. If you're 45 years old, understand what that means, because it does mean something. The initiatory sequence of man does not absolve itself from age. Anyone that thinks age doesn't matter at this point is ignoring the biological reality of energy and what happens within us and our consciousness as we become older. We change, and there's a lot available for us when we do. But if we ignore it, we just become adolescents in our 50s, of which there are a ton, even in conscious spaces. So be incredibly determined to surround yourself with the right men or get into a relationship with the right men or women. Matters. that was the first take. I didn't even think about it. I just started the reel, and as I was talking, I was like, yeah, this is what it is. This is what I'm here. And it was, I didn't pre-write it. There's nothing there. And I ended up creating a 5-minute video. And then I went, what the hell do I do with a 5-minute video response? Like, where would I even put that? And then I realized that there's a hack on Instagram where, you can't upload a 5-minute reel, but if you make it a post, it actually will upload as 5 minutes. And so I just said, fuck it. All right, let's see. And I posted it, and I thought it would be like, okay, 1,000 people, kind of my like most like passionate followers on Instagram would be like, wow, cool, thanks for the response. It was neat. Now that video is going crazy. And I didn't expect, like, to have a 5-minute reel go viral is absurd on the internet, but I'm committed to long form content because I'm not here for stupid sound bites. And I'm not here for virality. Honestly, I don't want it. I don't want, any of my videos to get 1 million views because it ends up bringing in people that are not the audience I'm trying to create. So the reel today, the 5-minute one, is being shared even more widely than the first. And I'm like, what is going on? And I think you hit it, which is all I'm doing is reflecting to the world what I'm doing in my life with my wife and my kids and my relationship and what I teach men in the spaces I teach. And I'm putting it out in the world, and people are just desperate for this degree of conscious masculinity that's like, look, I'm empowered. I am in control of my domain. I can provide, I can protect, like, legitimately. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. Like, when I talk about protection, like, we've had some real stuff happen over the past 5 years. Like, this is not some flippant term. Like, to actually protect a house under violence is a real thing that I've had to confront. And so I operate from that place. Like, I'm here to steward my wife in a safe way and my kids in a safe way. And I've really learned and cultivated that. And so I'm just coming from a different place than what I think the field is used to in terms of masculine consciousness.
And even in the spaces where conscious men are speaking about how to be in third stage relationships and how to, referencing David Data's third stage, even in spaces where men are talking about being conscious men and mature men, a lot of times you see the exact same pattern that you were speaking to. And so that's when women say, wow, that sounds good and it feels good. But then how does this fit together when... It's a tough one. And this is where the nuance comes in, because the ultimate thing is, of course, we want to be in relationships with people that are our people. And there can be wide ranges outside of our race and our religion and even our age. But when you see it as such a pattern, you have to question where it's coming from. And I think that's what you're speaking to in a way that just isn't spoken to.
Yeah. My experience in conscious spaces has been mixed. And I think there's a lot of good, but I think there's a lot of shadows that are even in those spaces. And I think the thing that I've realized is that it's a rare breed to be a man who's committed to holding a woman through her whole life and stewarding your kids and really being of an impeccable integrity and clarity. And in a world that's so peak experience infused, even in the consciousness space, there's so much of a push toward drugs and peak experiences. And I say drugs, and what I mean is like, actual drugs, things like DMT and other things. And ayahuasca and psilocybin, which, plant medicines have their use, but they get exploited and overused often and leave men in, emotional wreckage. And anyway, I without getting too much into this, I actually have less faith in the consciousness space in general. And I think what needs to happen is there needs to be cultural movements that are not that are just simply like the way I do my men's work is I'm just like, look, I'm a man. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm here to help men rise in power so they can get what they want and provide well.
You're talking about something that's a little bit more of a traditional version of being a mature masculine. In some ways, like it's maybe it's not really a throwback, it's rise up, a spiral up to a new version of the same past.
Yeah, well, it really is. And, just as an aside, I don't talk much about this. So, I used to be a photographer. That's what I did for my career for a long time. And I shot a lot of weddings, like hundreds of them over the course of 10 years. I wasn't just a wedding photographer. I had another company, but I did shoot weddings. And when you're a wedding photographer in the American South, what you end up interfacing with quite a lot is organic and multi-generational families, because people have kids younger in the South. And I didn't appreciate it when I was doing it. But now that I look back, I was really able to get into the realm where there were like great-grandparents, grandparents, fathers, and then daughters and sons that were being married. And I got to see these multi-generational families. And the thing that I saw in those spaces wasn't just that, but it was the community that was around them. And those weddings felt a lot different from the weddings that I shot in New York or Croatia or California, where they were much less family oriented. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, I've made friends with a lot of the people at the weddings that I've shot, and I've kind of tracked where they are in life. And I'm seeing a completely different experience of life. A lot of these weddings that happened in places where there weren't multi-generational kind of villages holding these families, they've already gotten divorced. And then there's people that are like in these other spaces where they're like cultivating a beautiful expression of family. And like what I'll say about this is, I did some research a decade ago around what happiness really is and where the happiest people were. And the thing that really shocked me was that happiness was really much more experienced culturally in places that were conservative. And I was like, what is that about? And when I looked at it, it was about, the village. It was about having multi-generations. If you have children and you have family around, that really alleviates the stress and pressure and the duress of raising kids. And so you can actually have a positive experience with it when you're supported. When there's always like a matriarch or a patriarch calling the family together every weekend, hey, let's get together, watch the game, let's go fishing, let's do things, let me take the grandkids, let's go. That energy creates such a vital possibility of life that's expressed as we are here together having a good time, even if it's just gumbo and beer.
Just as you were speaking that, I felt a bit of a wave of grief for the loss of that in our culture, because there's so many things that we've gained from our movement towards independence and sovereignty and our global ability to move around. But the collateral damage has really been to those traditional values of family and community on a larger scale. And, I grew up like that. I grew up with a father who stuck by my mother all the way through mental illness and challenge. And, until she died 53 years after they were married. And, it's a rare experience that people have. And I feel a lot of grief that I wasn't able to give that to my kids.
I had a grand reconciliation where I went, no, what's just true? And where can I find the deepest possibility of my life? I've just had to get out of any specific lineage or space and just go like, what does it mean to be a man in the world? And what can I really learn from the elders? And I interviewed a bunch of elders like a decade ago. And I have conversations with people that are older all the time because wisdom is real and you earn it across age. Where else am I going to get it? Traditionally, to be initiated, you're initiated by people that are older than you that have more wisdom and awareness and knowledge. And if we're not being initiated, then the only thing we can do is reach out to elders. And, even the elders need some work. I invited a bunch of men that were older that were kind of the first wave of men's work. And they came into my circle one time and I was hoping they could like co-facilitate with me. And when men were asking for feedback, like their answers were so flaccid and soft. And I was like, oh shit. And I realized something. The first wave of men's work was soft. It was soft. It was about softening men. And I think that's great, but like, I don't need soft leaders. I need men that are strong so that when a man's like, what do I do with my life? I need a 68-year-old or an 88-year-old man go, well, you're going to fuck it up until you get it right. That's the kind of answer I need from elders, sharp wisdom. And we just don't have elders that are willing to do that. So yeah, that's a problem. It's a problem that we have.
Well, and is one that you're working on, and I honor so deeply the fact that you're working with yourself to be that model and to live that life, but then you're also helping men do that too, because I think what you're hitting on is that we do need a new version of what the mature masculine and where you had as a wise elder as you get older. And so you're still a young man, and so I'm so excited about that your generation of men. And
you see these grays? You see these grays? I don't know about that.
I want to really underline and honor that you said something like, it is rare in our culture for us to have men who have the capacity, the wisdom, and the willingness to hold women all the way through their life cycle. And that is really deeply true. And so I think that just like we know that the feminine needs the masculine to be the safety and the space and the holding, if it's not through our whole lives, wow, what
what happens to the women, right?
What happens?
And it's a big abdication of leadership that men are just falling off on. Women need to be held. I was doing an AMA recently and I talked about the importance of marriage for the feminine. And I explained it through the lens of safety and how marriage is safety for the feminine. First of all, the feminine oscillates around safety at a baseline. That's just what's true. Men don't have to as much because we just don't have to interface with unsafety as much. I don't know what to do in terms of the culture, but I was really learning how to become, a solid man, a steward of my family. And my wife got pregnant with our first, just to clarify, when I met my wife, she had a 3-year-old. He's my son now, but he came with Kelly when I met her. When Juliana was conceived and Kelly was pregnant, there was something that I realized, which is that this is a completely different moment and it requires a different degree of holding as a man. And I went, okay, what is this really? How do I hold my wife during this moment where her body's going through this whole evolution and change? And then, she gave birth and that whole moment was different. And it was like nothing I had experienced before. And then all of a sudden, like I have needs that aren't being fulfilled. What do I do with those? And I was like, okay, how do I hold this truly? If I'm a man that's, going to do this from a conscious position, what does that look like? Now, without getting to the details of how you hold a woman through pregnancy and birth and really maintain a beautifully vital and vibrant relationship. That's what I learned how to do. And then something occurred to me, which is that we aren't having conversations about how to hold a woman through pregnancy. We're not having conversations about how to hold a woman through perimenopause, which is a very real circumstance, especially if someone has a holistic, frame and they're not on, medication that neutralizes their feminine experience. And I just realized there's all these parts where women are going through like different things. It's just wild. And so I think the thing I want to say to you is that as men, we could do better to understand what the feminine experience is across life in terms of how we hold it, not only for the sake of them, but for us as men. Like life gets really difficult when your woman's going through menopause. There's all these changes. And as men, we're like, what the hell's going on? Like, what? I don't get it. I don't know what this is. And if we don't know, we're not equipped to hold it. And so that's a big thing that I've been really focusing on is like, just at a decent logical level as a man, how do I hold a woman through pregnancy? How do I hold a woman through menopause? How do I hold a woman through the different things that she's inevitably going to go through biologically, because it's just the way it is.
You're hitting on it exactly right. And that is that all of us need more information. We all need more information about how to better connect, how to support, how to maintain our connection through this wild and crazy ride that is life, or we abandon each other, and it's not just one direction. Yeah,
there's a lot to lose if we don't figure it out. And so that's kind of where my work has been recently. I've been having a lot of conversations with people just around all these topics. And it's like, how can I better equip men to understand how to navigate it? And I teach it in my men's workspaces. I've been doing this for over a decade, and I've had men's circles for a long time. And so now just the depth of my teachings is shifting dramatically, as well as the depth of my own education. My wife isn't in menopause yet, and yet that is a thing that's coming for me. And it's a thing that women are going through now, and men are, how do I work with it? And I just realized I needed to learn. So I've reached out to a couple, women who kind of help women through menopause. And I've gone, what is this? Like, what do we need to know? And how do we hold it? And there's a way as men that we just have to be postured well with it, because otherwise we're going to go, I don't get it, and I'm not getting my needs met. And it's like, well, okay, so how do we work with this?
When I say I just turned 60, and a lot of times, people will say, oh, well, age is just a number. And I know their intent is to say, oh, I don't judge you for your age, and I accept you, and I recognize, I don't even see you that way. I'm going to take away all the stories that I have about age. But that's a denial of the truth of my journey. And 60 isn't just a number. It's a representation of a life I've lived, and experiences I've had, and wisdom I've gained, and consciousness I've cultivated.
Yeah, there is a denial of reality that's happening in the field. And the thing is, you can't escape what happens across age, no matter how much you want to ignore it. I mean, here's a really great example. I'll use this because it's scientifically sound and it's backed. So there's this whole thing where it's like, oh, you can have kids whenever. And everyone's like, yeah, I'll have kids someday. And like, they're like, I know men that are like 42 and they're like, I want to have kids someday. And I'm like, bro, your sperm's probably not even viable at this point. Like, you've messed the boat. 25 years passed. Or, you know what I mean? Technically, the window to have kids, and I know this isn't like socially acceptable, but it's like 15 to 30. If you have kids during that time, you can weather it better. When you have it, in our waning energetic years, like your late 30s and early 40s, when you have less and less energy, if you have kids, you have less energy for the kids. And so the thing that I'm trying to say here is there's a denial of reality when we say none of this matters and we'll have kids someday, or none of this matters and age isn't a thing. No, it's all a thing. And if we're not appropriately doing our life at the right age brackets, we really missed the boat.
And I would say that the nuance to that is that as we evolve as a human species and we do have longer lifespans, that our energy stores change. Like the ages, the numbers start to have a little bit of a different feel. Like, there wasn't a time when my age would have been completely decrepit, old, and because it was a different kind of access we had to vibrancy, to health, to healthcare, to medicine, to food, to all the things. But the trajectory still has some truth. There is an archetypal journey to it, is what I would say.
Yeah, and I think you just can't escape it. Like a woman that's 15, a woman that's 25, a woman that's 35, and a woman that's 45 are in completely different stations of life based on biology. And you can't ignore that that's just real. You know what I mean?
It's just true.
Yeah, and men in some ways similarly.
It's a little bit different for men. I think that women, I've always had the concept that women go through so many changes so much earlier than men, that we become more accustomed to change, or maybe we're more wired for change. And, movement and
100%.
fluidity, and men it's a little bit more shocking. And I think that that's why men in their 50s hit a change for the very first time. A lot of times men in their 50s, and that's why this is the population we're talking about largely, 40s and 50s, is for the very first time ever they hit a moment where they're like, ooh, hold on a second, something's changing. I don't have the same level of power, influence, or impact, and now I got to grasp for something to hold on to it.
Yeah. Bodies become less vital. Healing takes longer. Everything's changing. Yeah, physically. Yeah, it happens.
Thank you so much for jumping on. It's so great to see the amount of impact that you're having, the people that you're reaching, and that people are really recognizing the unusual power that you're bringing, because you're willing to say, like you said, what's true, what's real, and not pull any punches. And you're taking all the heat.
Yeah, well, I don't mind taking the heat. It's when the heat's directed at other people that don't deserve it that I'm a no to that. If we're going to change anything, you have to say the thing that people don't want to say. You have to be willing to say it, and you have to be willing to confront power. All I can say is I'm not afraid. I'm not scared. I mean, truth is truth, and people don't like to hear it, but that's because it flags their fragility and their lack of addressing their own stuff.
Well, I love you dearly as a friend, and I champion you, and I'm so thrilled for all that you're doing, and just want to point everybody towards you, because I think your message is so needed. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. Cool.
Yeah. And so if you're listening here, then I'm going to point you towards Max's Instagram page and all the ways that you can find him. And he's really on fire right now.
And let me just speak to that really quickly, just so that people that are listening know what I'm doing. So I'm about to launch the beginning of a massive 10 to 15 year push in men's work. And I'm going to create a bunch of men's work offerings. Some of them have to do with initiations for young boys, where I'll get, fathers to bring their sons, and we'll do some things. But a lot of them are going to be about just single individual men, taking men out into places and doing big events. Like, I'll have some that are like 50 men or less. I'll have some that are 100 to 200 men. That's all coming. And I'm also doing some work bringing men back to Europe to, reclaim our ancestry and reconnect with our roots. And so there's all this stuff that I'm developing right now, and I'm pretty deep in the weeds of developing it. And I'm also developing a bunch of programming on how we reignite intimacy and love, and stuff for couples and women too. And so if you're listening to this, there's a bunch of stuff that's going to be coming out really this year and next that's pretty powerful. So I'm excited to do it, and I'm in for it.
So follow along.